San Francisco, October 2007. Two roommates stare at an eviction notice on their kitchen table. Rent is due in 3 days. Their bank accounts, nearly empty. Their prospects, bleaker. This is the moment when most people give up. Apply for a corporate job, move back home, accept defeat. But Brian Chesky and Joe Gebbia, they decided to do something absolutely insane. They decided to rent out air mattresses in their apartment. Welcome to Billionaire's Playbook. This is the story of Airbnb, a company that would reshape global hospitality, disrupt a $100 billion industry, and prove that the most ridiculous ideas can become revolutionary empires. Let's rewind. Brian Chesky moved to San Francisco in 2007 with dreams of becoming a designer. His roommate, Joe Gebbia, shared those dreams. What they didn't share? Money. Their rent had just increased by 25%. $1,200 they didn't have. They were broke, desperate. And San Francisco was hosting a major design conference with every hotel completely booked. Gebbia sent Chesky an email at 3 in the morning. "I thought of a way to make a few bucks, turning our place into a bed and breakfast for the design conference. But here's the twist. They didn't have beds. They had 3 air mattresses. They threw together a basic website in one night, airbed and breakfast. They posted photos of their cramped Roush Street apartment. They promised homemade breakfast. The price? $80 per night, half what hotels were charging. Most people would have called this pathetic. A last-ditch effort by 2 failures who couldn't afford rent. 3 strangers paid to sleep on air mattresses in a cramped San Francisco apartment. And over breakfast, eggs, toast, and coffee, Brian Chesky had an epiphany that would birth a billion-dollar idea. What if this wasn't just about them? What if people everywhere could rent out their spaces? What if trust could be scaled? That weekend, they made $1,014. More importantly, they made proof of concept. Here's where the story gets brutal. Chesky and Gebbia brought in their former roommate, Nathan Blecharczyk, a Harvard-educated programmer who could actually build the platform. They launched officially in August 2008, targeting the Democratic National Convention in Denver. 80,000 visitors. Every hotel sold out. This was it. Their big break. They made $200 total. The platform was dying. They pitched to investors, 7 rejections in a row. One investor told them their idea was the worst they'd ever heard. Fred Wilson, a legendary venture capitalist, passed on investing. Years later, he'd call it the biggest mistake of his career. They were $30,000 in debt, maxed out 13 credit cards, no revenue, no hope. This is the valley of death that kills 90% of startups. The moment when reality crushes ambition, when the smart people quit. But Chesky, Gebbia, and Blecharczyk, they sold cereal. I'm serious. September 2008, they designed limited edition cereal boxes, Obama O's, the Breakfast of Change, and Cap'n McCain's, a maverick in every box. Hand-assembled in their apartment, sold for $40 a box. They made $30,000 selling breakfast cereal. This is the first lesson from Billionaire's Playbook. Survival requires creativity that borders on insanity. When traditional paths close, the greatest entrepreneurs don't just think outside the box, they sell the box for $40. With their cereal money, they applied to Y Combinator, the legendary startup accelerator. Paul Graham, the founder, admitted he thought their idea was terrible, but he believed in them. Why? The cereal boxes. Graham said, if they're creative enough to sustain themselves selling cereal, they're unstoppable. January 2009. They received $20,000 in funding and one piece of advice that became legendary: go to your users. So Chesky flew to New York with a $40 camera and literally knocked on doors of Airbnb hosts. He photographed their apartments. He learned something crucial. People weren't booking because the listings looked terrible. They improved the photos. Bookings doubled overnight, then tripled. By 2010, they'd facilitated 10,000 nights booked. By 2011, they'd raised $7.2 million from Sequoia Capital, the same firm that rejected them 2 years earlier. They'd expanded to 89 countries. The world was starting to notice. But just as Airbnb was rising, the problems began June 2011. A woman's San Francisco home was ransacked by an Airbnb guest. Destroyed. Violated. She wrote a blog post titled, "Violated, a Traveler's Lost Faith in Airbnb." The story went viral in 48 hours. The media pounced. Headlines screamed, The dark side of Airbnb. Trust, the foundation of their entire business, was collapsing in real time. Chesky faced a choice: issue a standard corporate apology and move on, or take full responsibility. He chose responsibility. He wrote a public apology. He introduced a $50,000 host guarantee, later increased to $1 million. He created a 24/7 customer service hotline. He personally called the victim and apologized. He didn't just fix the problem, he rebuilt trust from the ground up. Lesson 2. From Billionaire's Playbook. Crisis reveals character. How you respond to failure defines whether you become forgettable or legendary. Airbnb survived. And it didn't just survive, it exploded. 10 million nights booked. By 2015, 50 million. By 2019, over 400 million nights in a single year. They disrupted the entire hospitality industry. Marriott, Hilton, Hyatt. Billion-dollar chains suddenly faced competition from people's spare bedrooms. The numbers were staggering. By 2017, Airbnb offered more rooms than the top 5 hotel chains combined. 4 million hosts, properties in 191 countries, over 100,000 cities worldwide. The formula was genius. No inventory costs, no real estate purchases. Just a platform connecting supply and demand, taking a 3% cut from hosts and 14% fee from guests. By 2017, Airbnb was valued at $31 billion, more than Hilton worldwide, a hotel empire built over 98 years. 3 guys who couldn't pay $1,200 rent had created a global phenomenon. But then, 2020 arrived. March 2020, COVID-19 shuts down the world. Travel stops. Overnight, completely. Airbnb's bookings collapsed by 96% in 8 weeks. They laid off 1,900 employees, 25% of their workforce. Investors slashed their valuation from $31 billion to $18 billion. The company that revolutionized travel faced extinction. Chesky sent an emotional letter to laid-off employees, but he also did something strategic. He pivoted. While airlines focused on international routes, Airbnb shifted to local stays, staycations, remote work destinations. People couldn't fly to Paris, but they could drive an hour to a cabin. The Live Anywhere campaign was born. By summer 2020, over 50% of bookings were within 300 miles of the guest's home. The pivot worked beyond imagination. By June, bookings recovered to 50% of 2019 levels. December 10th, 2029 months after nearly dying, Airbnb went public. The stock opened at $146, valuing the company at over $100 billion. Brian Chesky's net worth? $11 billion. From Air Mattresses to a $100 billion IPO in 13 years. Today, Airbnb hosts over 7 million listings in more than 220 countries. They've facilitated over 1.5 billion guest arrivals. They've paid out over $180 billion to hosts worldwide. But the real story isn't about market cap. It's about 3 guys who refused to quit, who sold cereal boxes when investors said no, who rebuilt trust when it shattered, who pivoted when the world stopped traveling. Lesson 3 from Billionaire's Playbook. The greatest businesses solve real problems. Airbnb didn't just create a booking platform, they created belonging. They created economic opportunity for millions who could finally monetize their most valuable asset. Lesson 4. Timing isn't everything, persistence is. They launched during a recession. They survived a trust crisis. They thrived through a pandemic. Success isn't about perfect conditions. It's about perfect determination. From 3 air mattresses on Rausch Street to revolutionizing global hospitality. From $30,000 in credit card debt to a $100 billion empire. This is what's possible when you refuse to accept limitations, when you see opportunity where others see impossibility, when you turn desperation into innovation. This is Billionaire's Playbook, where we uncover the untold stories behind the world's greatest business empires, the failures nobody sees, the pivots that change everything, the moments that separate dreamers from builders. If you want to learn the real strategies behind billion-dollar companies, not the sanitized press releases, but the actual blood, sweat, and cereal boxes, then subscribe to Billionaire's Playbook for more untold stories of business empires. Because the next great company might start with someone just like you, staring at a problem, refusing to quit.